Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Would you kindly take a seat? And as a reminder, would you put your cell phone on silent, please? Good morning and welcome to Philadelphia. My name is Richard Berry. I'm the Chief of Police of the University of Central Florida in Orlando and past president of the IACP. And on behalf of the Board of Officers of IACP, again, welcome to Philadelphia and thank you for joining us here. I have a distinct pleasure today. I get to introduce your speaker. And a few things that you need to know about Central Florida. While we are a large metropolitan area, law enforcement-wise, we're a pretty small group, and we depend on each other. We depend on our personnel. We work seamlessly together, and I have to tell you, when these bad situations happen, you find out how important that cross-jurisdictional cooperation and those partnerships and having each other's cell phone way in advance make a huge difference. So let me tell you a little bit about Chief Mina. Before joining the Orlando Police Department, he was with the 82nd Airborne. That ought to tell you something about the kind of guy he is. He spent 17 years on the SWAT team and was the SWAT commander before becoming Chief of Police. And I'm going to tell you something you don't know about John, and that is he's always been very strong on the training side, officer safety, and how critical it is to their survival. And long before Pulse, while working in off-duty detail, like a lot of our people do, and like I've done, and like you've done in the past, John walked into that off-duty detail where there was an armed robbery going on, and he won that gunfight. And since he's been chief, he's pushed that training even further, which is why you're going to learn so much today about the men and women who responded there and their courageous acts. And you're going to hear more about one of their lieutenants, who I'll save. You'll hear more about him and his actions and how he led those officers inside that nightmare called Pulse. So John is a cop's cop. He walks the walk and talks the talk, and he's also very smart. He hired my son. So, and again, it's that commitment to training, it's that commitment to personnel, which was one of the reasons my son left the Orange County Sheriff's Office and went to Orlando Police Department, quite frankly. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, a great law enforcement officer and a good friend, John Mina, Chief of Police, City of Orlando.
Thank you, Chief Berry. What a great introduction. And good morning. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today. And this is an opportunity for all of us to learn from our situation. We said right from the very beginning that it's our responsibility from the Orlando Police Department, the Central Florida Law Enforcement, to kind of share our challenges and our lessons learned from this very horrific tragedy. We did a lot of things right, and we did some things wrong. So just tell you a little bit about Orlando. What you don't know is, we're up to 275,000, our population, but more importantly, our visitor population is going to go up to probably 68, 70 million this coming year. So very big tourist population. This is a little bit about the Orlando Police Department and the Orlando Fire Department, the size of our agency. 773 sworn now, so almost 1,000 personnel with our civilians. And like Chief Berry said, we rely on our brother and sister agencies in our area to help us out. So this is just kind of a layout of where Pulse was located. As you can see, that's Pulse nightclub right there. That's where we had ultimately our triage area was set up. This is the fire department. It's right across the street from Pulse nightclub, and that's very important right up there. So ORMC is the #1 trauma center in Central Florida, and those medical personnel were truly responsible for saving dozens and dozens of lives. So as you know, within those first hours, we received assistance from over 300 local, state, and federal officers.
Shots fired, 1912, South Orange Avenue, shots fired, multiple down.
Emergency 911, stress the lines reported.
Based on information we received from the suspect and from the hostages and people inside, we believe that further loss of life was imminent.
He is shot right outside the club.
Alright, we got multiple down. I only got one officer here with me. I still have a subject inside.
So this is Pulse Nightclub, the layout. And what a lot of people don't realize is how small of a place this is. This is really no bigger than your average TGI Fridays or Outback Steakhouse. Very, very small place. Just a couple things to point out. This is the area where our extra duty officer was when the incident happened. His unmarked vehicle was parked there. He had been dealing with an underage drinker in this area right now when he heard the first shots being fired. That right there is the suspect's vehicle. You can kind of see it shaded out right now. So he basically parked there and then made his way here to the entrance.
Sunday, June 12th, 2016. The time, 2:03 a.m.
Number 291, just the line supported. Hello? Hello?
So this is our first 911 call. You'll start hearing gunshots in the background.
Hello? Hello? Are you at Pulse? Hello? Can anyone hear me? Me too.
So that's the first 911 call, and so that all happened within a couple minutes, and you probably heard 2 or 3 magazine changes in that. So most of the damage, most of the killing was all done within the first 2 or 3 minutes. Like I said, 202, he enters the club. Our officer sees him, hears the shots, then sees him, and immediately engages in a gunfight with the suspect. So this is where the suspect entered from the north into these doorways. Detective Adam Gruler was in this area. He sees him in this area, and they basically exchange gunfire through there. Again, that's the entrance that the suspect went in. There's another entrance over here. And this is the entranceway where Detective Gruler saw him and shot at him in this way, and we believe he shot at Detective Gruler. That window right there, that's important. That's the actual entry window that we went in. So, and again, this is just to kind of show you out. So one team eventually goes into this window, which I just saw you, and then another team went in through the patio, the east patio. This is Detective Gruler. Basically, after that initial gun exchange on the south side of the club, he moves over to this truck, and this is video, a still shot of traffic video, where you'll see him in a couple slides exchange gunfire. That's the second responding officer as well. And what they're doing is, so the reason they make their way from the south to this side is because the suspect went deeper into the club and he knows the layout, so he's like, okay, he's going out to the patio area where there are a bunch of people. That's him basically, hey, he's in the patio, let's move over there. And that's when our officer arrives with the dash cam. And so from this vantage point, he fires multiple times, and you'll see at least one of those from this towards the patio area. So that's just within a minute or two of the shooting, and you heard the gunfire, and then the stoppage of the rifle fire, and then you heard it again. We believe he was on his 4th magazine at that point. So, you know, much like all of you, we have been training an active shooter since Columbine for many, many years, and that's what they did. So they're like, hey, you know what? I have enough people in here. Let's go. So they eventually make their way to the east patio area. And that's when Lieutenant Scott Smith arrives. So Scott is at this point, he's a patrol watch commander, the highest ranking supervisor on the street. And I'll tell the story. So Scott has got 26 years on the Orlando Police Department, has been in every single tactical unit you can think of, SWAT team for 20 years. He was in K-9, he was in fugitive apprehension, he was in our tactical unit. So he has a lot of experience. This is the guy that you want to respond. And I joke around, but I'm serious about it. And he's the guy, break glass in case of emergency. That's the guy you want there, and we're so very lucky that he was there, and you'll see his leadership throughout this. So I know he does this presentation as well. He probably does it better than me. Talks about a lot of the tactics, but one of the things that I noticed when he does his presentation, he says that he heard those rifle shots being fired. He knew exactly what he had, and he forgot to take his heavy vest or his Kevlar helmet and just responded in his regular patrol gear. So while Scott was kind of assessing the scene, he's hearing the gunshots. He's not that familiar with the nightclub, but he makes his way over to the south side and starts to form a team, and that's when that team on the east side, they start to form as well. So about the same time, we have a team on the south side going in and the team on the east side going in. Here was our first mistake, is those two teams did not coordinate or communicate. So no, hey, we're going in on the south, or we're going in on the east. That never happened. They didn't know until they got inside, and thankfully nothing happened because of that. There were no crossfire issues. So again, this is very early in the scene. So remember, I showed you that plate glass window that was broken. So Scott and his team go up there. They try and kick the window out. And so when I asked Lieutenant Smith, I said, well, why don't you just go through those big double doors? And he said he could hear that rifle fire, those gunshots going off, and he didn't know. And you can imagine the echoing going on. And it sounded to him like that the bad guy was right there, and he just thought if he brought his guys in there, it would just be a meat grinder, and they would be killed. So they wanted to enter through that plate glass window, which you'll see kind of provides not cover, but it did provide a little bit of concealment. So this is the plate glass window. Like I said, he said, there's no way I'm going to take my guys in through there. He's going to see us coming through the main doorways. And they thought that this would be a better plan. You can see there's a little bit of concealment. It's not cover. There's a drywall. His bullets could have penetrated those walls, but they thought, well, that offers us a little bit of concealment.
Air 465.
That's him throwing his baton and breaking the plate glass window. And we'll do that one more time.
Air 465. Air 39.
And you see the window break.
Okay.
So Lieutenant Smith and his team, they enter through that front parlor area, and you'll see a video of that too from within inside the business. And they're kind of, so when they initially go into that front parlor area, the gunshots had stopped. They heard them right as they were outside, but once they went in, the gunshots had stopped. So you'll see them doing like a slow and deliberate clear of that immediate area, trying to get their bearings and make sure the suspect's not there. And then what you'll see is you'll see them move quickly in two different videos, because then they do hear the sound of gunfire coming from the rear. So, and when that happens, the suspect, we believe, is basically, that forces the suspect into the rear bathroom.
Yeah. You got your Air 465. Here. Watch. Probably one of the officers. He's still active in the area.
You got a door up top with a sheet.
Alright. Kind of need to get that past OPD and Metro 9. We just have a wide perimeter, see if we can contain it. The shooter's still active and up. Understood. North and east, so we'll need it west, southwest. 26. See the south that you just set the perimeter? All Orange County, you guys are working on perimeter positions and lockdown. So show we got your phone.
Wide around the corner.
Go forward. County 343 Delta. We need SD on Kaylee. Just one big orange.
Take a bathroom with him! Clear! What the fuck?
04012. You in a position where you can find me a staging area?
Yeah! Yes, take the bar! Bathroom slip! Bathroom slip! Cut it off!
Test 12, no people start trying to get information for you.
Where the fuck is this coming from?
County 1.
So you see how small that club is. They go in, they hear the gunfire, then they immediately have to stop because the gunfire stops, and they come upon that back bar area. You'll see a lot of stress, of course. They know what's going on. They're seeing dead bodies. They had heard the rifle fire. This is also important to mention, which I didn't mention. So those officers you saw going through that front plate glass window, they were all experienced. Most of them were all experienced officers as far as being on our SWAT team or some kind of tactical unit. But they knew what they were listening to, and really all the officers on the scene did. They knew that was rifle fire from inside. That very distinct sound of rifle fire. So they went in through that window knowing that the vest that they were wearing would not stop that rifle round. So you also see in there a little bit of noise and light discipline. The officer in the back with his flashlight on, he's from a smaller agency, and that's probably another mistake. Although we did a lot of regional training, maybe not as much with the smaller agencies, and we just don't backlight each other like that. But I give that kid a lot of credit. He was fairly new with little training, followed those other officers in there, and under a very stressful situation. So that's the last part of the video you saw, that they're kind of in this. This is the back bar area. This is a short hallway that leads to 2 bathrooms. And so when they get to this point, it's not that big. They've basically cleared everything else that they think where he could have been. So they deduce that he's got to be down that hallway. And there's a couple other things. There's a hallway, there's 2 bathrooms, and there's also 2 dressing rooms that they have to deal with. So while Scott and his team are doing that, the other team that I talked about, they went in through the east patio. They end up going, and you see that's where they entered, from that east patio. They end up coming upon this door, and the door is, they try to check the door, and it's not locked, but they feel resistance. So they're like, kind of like, oh my gosh, this is the guy? Well, that was the survivors pushing back on the door. So this is kind of interesting. We preach the run, hide, fight. So 22 people, when the shots were fired, instead of just running out or running through that fence, climbing over that fence, getting out, this represents freedom and safety. 22 people jammed themselves into that bathroom to hide. So again, here's where the 22 people were rescued in those first couple minutes. This is that front parlor area where the window was broken, and they made their way. So as they're coming in through here, they see and hear the other team, and all that's being checked, and that's why they make their way back here, because they believe that he's got to be in this area. So you'll see some video and pictures. Eventually, it's a very short hallway, 2 opposing doors with like frosted glass on it, that the suspect could easily see movement coming from behind. So they kind of make their way behind here to take cover and deal with him. So while this is happening, and I'll show kind of an animation of that, there's more and more officers. So within minutes of the shooting, there's 20 or so officers inside of that nightclub rescuing people. As you can imagine, nothing can prepare you for what those officers saw. They basically saw a dance floor with over 20, 30 people, lying down the dance floor. And at some point, they had to say, "Hey, if you're alive, raise your hand." And just a couple of them did, so they were able to get those people out there. So that's kind of the things that they were dealing with. So by 2:16, Lieutenant Smith, he knows what he has. So this is kind of interesting, because a lot of people talk about active shooter, and did we treat it as an active shooter? Did we treat it as a barricaded gunman? Yes, and yes. So what this was, this is an active shooter situation that turned into a barricaded situation, that turned into a barricaded situation with hostages, and that turned into a barricaded situation with hostages, and the suspect suspect and hostages saying they had explosives, and the canines that responded to the scene also made a positive indication for explosives on the suspect's vehicle. So, and this all happened very, very quickly. So, went quickly from an active shooter situation to a situation where we thought SWAT, with all our capabilities, with explosive breaching, was better suited for than to just go rush into a bathroom, which they really didn't know which bathroom he was in. Oh, and on top of all that, the suspect called in and said he pledged his allegiance to ISIS. So it's not your typical active shooter situation. So by 2:17, you'll see on the video, Lieutenant Smith and Sergeant Backus, they see the suspect. They do fire rounds at the suspect. None of those rounds did hit the suspect. And so again, they continue to assess and find a way. What's the best way to tackle this situation? So this is just kind of an animation to show you at what time. So 2:06, those officers are making entry into the club, and those are the red X's. I'll kind of flip through this. So again, within minutes of the shots being fired, our officers are inside the club, despite hearing the sound of a rifle being fired. They're doing their job. This is what we do. This is active shooter deployment. This just kind of shows you their progression. And they set up on that west bar because they believe he's in that hallway. So by 2:18, almost 20 officers are inside of that club. We like to point that out because shortly after the incident was over, there was this false narrative pushed by the media that we basically stood outside and waited for 3 hours. So let me go back and kind of set this up again. So there was this false narrative from the media that we basically showed up and stood outside for 3 hours and waited for SWAT. And as you saw from the video and from this animation, absolutely false. So the next video kind of runs you through from the entry and to going into that back bar.
39-7.
That's where they hear the shots. And the shots stop and they kind of hesitate to assess. So this is him looking down that hallway towards the west. He's got that west bar behind him. A very short hallway with 2 opposing doorways where they're not sure which bathroom the suspect is in. So again, no shots being fired. They just know they have a barricaded subject who's killed multiple people with hostages now. See him pointing right there? That was a patron hiding behind the bar, which is also pretty scary. They didn't realize that person was hiding behind the bar while they were trying to assess. So that's when the suspect peeks out the doorway. They shoot. They believe they miss him at that point. And those are the last shots fired until the final assault. So while that's all going on, those hundreds of officers that are getting there, you saw from the one video, there's people running outside, so our officers are dealing with that. They're taking them to a triage area. They're removing people. They're finding people. You know, they were hidden in little nooks and crannies that you think, like behind that bar. They're trying to get all those people to safety. So About 2:21, we're able to communicate with a hostage who's inside one of the bathrooms, saying that the suspect was reloading. So we learned this from Aurora, right? The fire department was overwhelmed with the amount of patients. So you know how cops are, they're just going to do what they do. They just started loading victims into the unmarked Ford F-150 and taking them up less than a half mile down the road to the hospital. And we believe they transported 15 people on their own. Again, great lessons learned from the shooting in Aurora. Can't always wait for the fire department. Let's get these people to the hospital. And that's them with their pickup truck loading victims on. While they're doing that, while Scott and the other two teams are inside. So by 2:30, we had rescued those 22 patients from behind the bathroom. Another 6 people were hiding in a small upstairs office, and those people had been communicating with our 911 dispatcher saying, hey, come get us, come get us. So there was a team that had to be sent up there very carefully to extract them. And then, like I said, within 33 minutes of the first shot being fired, 22 victims were pulled to safety. So by 2:35, all the critically injured victims have been removed, and we're still dealing. So eight dancers hiding in a west dressing room, 4 dancers hiding in another dressing room. So we're dealing with all that. So this is kind of what they have by 2:30. Like I said, all our officers are set up in this area, and they know they have the suspect in one of these bathrooms. But we knew there were multiple people in each of those bathrooms, and there were also people in this dressing room and this dressing room. And those people, before the final assault, were able to rescue 8 people out of this dressing room, which I'll show you, and then 4 people out of this dressing room here. So this is his first call.
Emergency 911, this is Dr. Lines being recorded.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
What?
I want to let you know I'm in Orlando, and I did the shooting.
What's your name?
My name is, I pledge of allegiance to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi of the Islamic State.
Okay. What's your name?
I pledge my allegiance to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, Hafidullah, on behalf of the Islamic State.
Where are you at?
In Orlando.
Where in Orlando?
So that was the first call. Our negotiators did a good job, and there's another 5 or 6 calls that we won't play here, but our negotiator, who's now retired, did a phenomenal job of just trying to keep this guy engaged, trying to find out everything. And yeah, I think at one point he wanted some terrorists freed, and our negotiator did a pretty good job. I'm not saying no, but he said you probably need a little bit of help with that and a little bit of time. So, just like many of you, like I said, we started active shooter, but this turned into a very serious hostage situation involving explosives, involving hostages in multiple areas, and then the terrorist nexus that we were trying to negotiate. And we went with our training and our policies, and still believe those are the right decisions. Hey, there's no saying that this guy won't come off, and if we have to go in there and kill him, we will. But we're going to try and what do we know about that? Doing an assault into a 141 square foot bathroom with 8 to 10 hostages in there. We know that many hostages will be killed in that final assault, possibly, and officers will be killed as well. So, of course, we're going to try and negotiate, see if he'll give up, and that was what we did until our options kind of ran
Emergency
out.
911, this is Dr. Lines being recorded.
So again, this is the vehicle that was driven by the suspect. 2 different K9 teams that were deployed made a positive indication for explosives. Turns out there were never any explosives in his car. We think maybe it was the amount of ammunition that he had in there. So this is kind of when things start to change for us. So all through this night, we're saying, well, when we make our assault, if we have to, what's the best way that we're gonna do this? And we knew, our SWAT team commander knew right away, we're gonna have to do an explosive breach on the outside. I know if I send my men in there through that bathroom, that hostages will die. So it's kind of hard to see in some of the pictures, but when you enter those bathroom doors, there's kind of like a little switchback, so you can't see in the bathroom. You have to enter and then go around, and then so very, very dangerous to go in through those doorways, unless you had to, unless you started just shooting people at random. They were set up to go in and handle that, but we knew the best way for us to handle this would be through an explosive breach and save as many hostages as possible. So once our SWAT team commander was notified, Captain Mark Canty, he knew right away. He said, let me call the Orange County Sheriff's Office, who we train with right away. They have an explosive breach team that we have trained with in the past. I've done that training with them when I was on the SWAT team. So we knew the capabilities of each other, and we knew we needed their assistance in this. And so we were getting a lot of information from not only people inside, but people inside calling, texting, sending messages, Facebook text messages, and you'll see some of them, to family members on the outside. So one of the messages that we got was that from someone inside the bathroom, that this guy, Mateen, was going to put on these bomb vests, 4 of them, and send people out the 4 different sides of the club in 15 minutes. And the bomb vest thing is interesting because in the talk with the negotiator, he had mentioned something about a vest. So we were very concerned about this and decided we needed to really take some action. And again, this is just different text messages that we received from people texting other people that were inside the club. Basically people telling them there's a shooting, and you can tell someone they don't believe them. So a lot of information was coming that our 911 system was definitely getting overwhelmed. We have a system where if our system in the city of Orlando gets overwhelmed, it goes to the sheriff's office, and so they receive just as many calls as we did. So this is the West dressing room. So in those early hours, as our SWAT team was deploying, our SWAT operators were getting there, and they're trying to, we have guys, men and women on the inside, so we're trying to get exact layout of the outside. So one of our SWAT guys he has the manager with him, and he's taking him along this west wall, and he's saying, okay, what's this room here? What's this room? Where's the north bathroom, and where's the south bathroom, and what's this? So he's kind of dragging this guy along. He's like, okay, point it out. Do you think that's where the south bathroom is? Because remember, we're trying to set up for an explosive breach, so these have to be placed exactly where the explosive breach team wants them placed. So this guy is on the phone. This manager, he's on the phone, so the SWAT guy's pulling him. He's like, come on, get off the phone. And he wouldn't get off the phone. And so our SWAT officer's saying, who could you possibly be on the phone with that's more important than what we're doing right now? He's like, I'm talking to my employees. They're inside. He's like, you're talking to someone in that room right there? And he's like, yeah. He goes, give me that phone. And so he talks to me. He's like, hey, are you inside? And he says, yes, I'm inside the club. And he's like, well, describe where you're at. So what he describes is, he asks him, well, is there an outside wall air conditioning unit? He said, yes. So a SWAT team goes up there. They kind of tap on that, an air conditioning unit that was out there, and they decide, you know what, if we do this quietly enough, we can rescue. He said, hey, there's 8 people in here with me. We want to get out. And I'm like, okay, we want to get you out. So the SWAT officers are out there trying to be very quiet, and they figure they can't pull it out. So they formulate this plan with this guy who's on the other end of the phone and said, hey, well, what we're going to do is we're going to push this air conditioner in. You guys have to catch it, but you can't make a sound. The bad guy's right next to you. He's going to hear you, and he could shoot through that wall. So they did. Those people, they wanted to get out more than you can ever imagine. They caught that air conditioner wall, gently placed it down, and they stepped on this sink to get out that window. And there were some pretty big people that crawled through that little window to safety. It's amazing how small you can make yourself when you want to survive. So great job by them, and it was interesting, the guy on the phone, and the SWAT guy tells him, he goes, oh yeah, one last thing. He goes, you have to be the last one out. And the guy's like, what? Oh, yeah, he wanted to be, he's like, no, I have to know everyone's out, so you'll be the last one out and, stay on the phone with me. So a lot of bravery showed from not only all of our officers who responded, but some of the survivors and hostages from inside. So about 5:02, well, shortly before that, that's when I'm getting this information that he's going to put these 4 bomb vests on. So, we decide there's no way we're going to let this guy blow up this club. So that's when I tell my SWAT commander, I said, tell me the plan one more time, quickly. And he had already told me. He tells me, I said, okay, let's go. Let's do an explosive breach on the south bathroom. There were hostages in there. Let's save as many people as we can right now, because we thought there were 15 to 20 people in that south bathroom, and we'll assess. But we're not going to just let this guy put these bomb vests on and start blowing people up. So the explosive breach did not fully breach the wall. It only partially worked, and love these officers. They took the initiative. They had talked about it before. Like, hey, if it doesn't work all the way, we have our armored Lenco Bearcat all set up with the ram on it. We'll start knocking holes through the wall, and that's what they did. So you're looking at the west side of the club and the back wall. So they start using that Bearcat to make their own hole.
Right there.
So you see them moving further to the right or to the south there because they want to try and get to that south bathroom. So I'm talking to the hostages and the survivors in the south bathroom. You heard those the people in the south bathroom start yelling.
Kevin! Back here! Kevin! Get the fuck back here with your rifle and get on that door! Hey!
Hey, you want to get them? Yep. Let's go.
Come on! Let's go! Keep your hands up!
Back here. Back here, back here, back here.
This is them rescuing those people from the south bathroom. Probably another thing that we could have done better was the command staff, myself, communicate better to make sure the outside perimeter units knew exactly what we're doing, so that maybe someone would have been a little bit closer to start assisting us. But they, the cops do what they that has to be done, and they saw what needed to be done, and they did it. So you saw them at one point. They start using a handheld ram to make that hole even bigger, so that people could crawl out. So while they're doing that, they do hear shots being fired from that north bathroom, and there's different accounts. Some people say the shots were being fired at our officers. Some people say that he was over the stall, blindly trying to shoot the hostages that were in there with him. Our officers deployed 2 flashbangs in towards one of those holes that we made to divert him from that, and that's when he comes out. So that action draws the suspect out. He comes out and immediately starts firing at our officers. Officer Napolitano gets struck in that Kevlar helmet. He actually had a set of night vision goggles on that. They hit the night vision goggles, and that made that dent in the hospital. If, 1 inch lower, that would hit him, right in between the eyes. So as you can imagine, numerous SWAT officers, as soon as he started firing, they returned fire, killing the suspect. So you'll see some video of that. You'll see Officer Napolitano. I'll try and point it out to you. He basically gets hit, goes down, comes back up, returns fire, then goes to reload. And then you could see him kind of playing with his helmet, not knowing exactly what had happened. So the suspect is kind of laying right near one of the large holes that we made. And as Lieutenant Smith and the team approaches, they see what they believe is a battery pack near his body. Battery pack with some wires. And I'll kind of explain that later. Scott Smith says, you know what, we're not taking any chances, and basically shoots the suspect one more time through the head so that we can go in there to continue to save the rest of those victims and not worry about this guy trying to detonate something while our officers were trying to handcuff him.
Shots fired north bathroom, shots fired north bathroom. Napolitano reloading. Watch him come back. He's kind of playing with his helmet, trying to figure out what happened.
Zone 45, 89 also secured via LAMP. 1669, Neville across the Ritz-Top and Briarmore South Trace. Also advising of a battery refused FD by the husband.
They approached the suspect.
Unknown is 10-8 on foot or in a vehicle, but it's 10-8.
Equity Valiant is 10-4 on the channel.
So he's telling him, hey, I think I was shot. This is the view that I had from the command post. You'll see this right here.
the shots being fired right there. And one of our officers almost got ran over by our Bearcat as he was backing up. And that's when they roll up to assess. They see what they believe is the battery pack or possible explosives and take care of the threat. So that's Officer Napolitano being treated by our officers. I could say I was in the command post and we heard one of our officers was shot and needed medical attention. And this is where I'll talk about this a little bit later, but our failure to communicate properly with the fire department and have them in there with the command post, big mistake. We had trained with doing that incident command for years. Pictures of myself from previous training sitting right next to the fire chief. The fire chief wasn't on scene. His highest ranking chief decided he likes where he's at this other command post that they had set up. Wrong decision, bad decision. As a matter of fact, when they called for the fire department to help one of our officers, they said, "Hey, we're not going into the hot zone." So I took my radio, I almost threw it through the window of the command post. I decided not to. I was so mad at those guys. Because we had trained with them before, you're not going to be the first or second team in, but you're going in with us. And certainly when our SWAT guys are in there and telling you to come in, it's more than safe for you. So I'll talk about that a little bit more. But we basically took him to them, which shouldn't happen. So again, the remaining victims were removed. 5 victims were rescued from the north bathroom and 13 from the south bathroom.
Where the fuck's the rest of my...
And this will just show you kind of the chaos. This is after the suspect's already dead, but just the chaos at the scene and dealing with people who had been held hostage, who had been shot at for 3 hours.
Where the fuck's the rest of my guys?
Where'd they go?
I don't know. 3 patrol! 3! Let's go! 4! Oh, right there. Yeah, that's exciting. I need one with me, one with me, one with me.
This way, Scott. Over here.
Right here, come on. Hands up, get your hands up. Hands up. No, she don't need a stretcher, she's walking. She's walking, come on. Come on, let's go. Watch yourself. Come on, hurry up, keep your hands up. Watch your step.
So you can see how chaotic that was. So by 5:27, all the remaining victims were rescued. This is kind of where everyone was found. 9 deceased victims in the northwest bathroom, 4 in the southwest bathroom. So the important thing is 49 in all were deceased, 58 injured victims. So this kind of just shows you what they were dealing with, how tight everything was. Scott and his team are back here behind this bar. Not too far to the hallway there. It's another picture of that west bar area with that hallway leading down towards the bathroom. So that's the opposing doors I was talking about. You see the challenge there of obviously anyone inside that bathroom seeing an approach. That's the south bathroom, 115 square feet, and numerous people jammed in there. It's kind of the pictures of the holes that were made in the south bathroom. That's a hole that was made in the north bathroom. Again, north bathroom, 141 square feet. So this is where the suspect, after the SWAT officer shot him, this is kind of where he ended up landing, and the final shot was taken. So remember I talked about the officer's approach. They saw this battery pack with wires. Somehow in all of this, this is an exit sign, and part of that exit sign had fell down close to where the suspect was, so that's what they were seeing. There was never any explosive device, but they couldn't know that at the time, and made the right decision. So that's that west wall. You see the holes that were made by the Bearcat and by the handheld ram. It's interesting to see those are our rounds that were being fired. None of those rounds penetrated the second part of the cinder block, so they made it through that first cinder block and then just died right there. It's just kind of an overview of afterwards and how we dealt with the crime scene. So this is Pulse right here. Shortly after, we had our city engineers and folks basically erect the fence all the way around this so that we could control the entire scene. So the only people inside there were our crime scene investigators, our detectives, and the FBI, and everyone else was kept out. Again, that's just another view of there's Pulse right there, and that's the view of the fence that we put up. That's Shooter. I'm not going to talk too much about him. We know about him. We know there's a pending trial with his wife as well, which we won't talk about either. FBI, they were great, and this goes back to our relationships, and I'll hit on this now and then maybe a little later. We have, just as Chief Berry said, we have great relationships in Central Florida with local, with state, with federal. We see each other constantly. And at different meetings, we're always communicating. Myself and the Assistant Special Agent in charge in Orlando, Ron Hopper, first name basis. We know each other's families. He texts me all the time. We had a great relationship before, obviously even better afterwards. But he was, hey, John, I got this working. I just want to let you guys know about it. Nothing to be concerned yet, but just want to put it on your radar. So it was constant communication. And that night when he found out about it, probably shortly after I did, he was getting mixed information from his people. So he just picked up the phone and called the chief, which he can do. And I was on my way, and I was like, yep, this is the real deal. We had an active shooter. There's possible terrorist ties. I'm on my way. So great relationship. They basically were there in the command post and stayed out of everything until it was over. Didn't get involved in the way we were going to deploy or we were going to do our assault. Just kind of stood there and said, hey, he even called his HRT team. He said they're on the way, but he knew it would be over before they got there, and so did we. But they did, the resources that the FBI put into this were amazing, and it was a great partnership. And then shortly after the suspect was killed, we kind of all sit down, did a little round table, and we definitely decided, and they didn't come and say, hey, this guy said he was pledged his allegiance to ISIS, this is ours, we're taking it. It wasn't like that at all. He says, John, what do you think? And I said, yeah, it's definitely you guys. And all those federal resources came with it, so that was the good part. Probably the bad part about them being involved is they're very close and tight with the information, which is good. But as I told you, there was people are just going to start saying stuff, especially the media. So there was these false narratives being pushed, and I'm like, Ron, I need to tell these people what I did and what my team did. Because what they're saying is wrong. And he's like, okay. And finally, we agreed, we're putting this out. So you guys can do it with us jointly or not. And that's what we did. So again, the Orlando Police Department, there's no way we could have done this and been as successful as I thought on our own. And so 27 different agencies, Chief Berry's folks were here, Orange County Sheriff's Office, and you see all the different local, state, and federal agencies that assisted us. I do like to brag about our hospital staff, #1 trauma center in Central Florida, and they're responsible for saving dozens and dozens of lives. The main trauma surgeon, Dr. Cheatham, he's probably the most experienced. He has been through all those tabletop exercises. So when the transports started to come in and he saw the wounds
that obviously were from a rifle, and he saw the amount of victims and the amount of people. He knew exactly what he had to do, or he knew exactly what he had, and he made all the right phone calls and did everything that they do to make sure that everyone from their hospital responded. Our medical examiner, they did a phenomenal job, and I can't remember the name of it right now, but they have a whole network. So basically, obviously, they had to do 49 autopsies, well, 49 plus 1, and they did them all within 72 hours. But that's because they had the whole state network to help them out. And it's interesting. This was the medical examiner's second week on the job, and he had to deal with this. But he had had a lot of experience and did a phenomenal job. And I just talked about this with the multi-jurisdictional. You see, DEA was there. Our local DEA SAC showed up, and they have absolutely no role in something like this. They really don't. But he wanted to help. He wanted to show up, and they said, whatever you need. And he said, well, and this is going in 2 days into it. I said, well, there's all these survivors. All these people that we've interviewed, we've taken statements, but their cars are not in the scene, but their cars are near the scene. So we need to get those cars transported to them, and that will help us probably get back to normal too as well. Let's get them their cars back. Let's start working on opening up streets and businesses. And they volunteered. The DEA agents volunteered to go get these people's cars. So it was a great effort. The media and the role of our public information officers, and we have one here, Michelle Guido, phenomenal job and of getting out our message. They came out right away. I don't know if you follow us on Twitter, but they came out right away saying, hey, this is where all the official information will come from, and put out numerous tweets, keeping the media, keeping the public informed. They played a very critical role, helped us all out, helped with that portion of it, because you can't do it all on your own. And in talking with the media, we had, just like you've seen, like in Las Vegas, we had several press conferences a day, and we were very coordinated, because as you can imagine, there were a lot of different entities involved. Federal and obviously local, but both the police, the sheriff's office, the FBI, and of course, our mayors and the governor. So we coordinated every single press conference. This is who's going to speak. This is when they're going to speak. This is what they're going to speak about. We didn't want to kind of someone going off message. And basically, what we wanted to do is, especially in this first press conferences, what happened? What did we do? How are we going to move forward with the investigation and how to keep people safe? That's the important message you have to get out right from the very beginning. And then afterwards, there's a whole other things about victims and notifications, and we were very lucky in the fact that all the victims' identities were found, and we knew who everyone was, the deceased victims, within a very short period of time. And we're lucky in the fact because they were at a nightclub, so everyone had their wallets and IDs with them. So that was very helpful, and kind of helped us do our jobs. So one thing I probably was not prepared for, we killed the suspect. The FBI was taking over. I knew we were going to supply a lot of resources to this scene, to this whole block, but I didn't realize that the amount of vigils and prayer services that we were going to have. And within that first week, everyone wanted to have one. And I'm talking numerous groups, 20 different groups. So what we did is we go with the leaders of those groups, and we tried to funnel them together. We'd say, hey, they're doing a large vigil in front of the Dr. Phil's Performing Arts Center. Why don't you guys, because they do all this on Facebook, why don't you guys just come there? And that's a big advice, a big piece of advice that I would give to you. So that's fine. You can't stop them. They're going to have them, and you're going to have to provide security for them. We had a community, a large LGBT community that was affected, along with the Hispanic community, who felt very threatened, who wanted to have their vigils, but also were threatened about their own safety. So we had to supply security for all those vigils, and we did all of it. We had a lot of help from the surrounding agencies as well. Another huge thing that was very, very important to us at the Orlando Police Department, and like I had said before, we knew that our officers, no matter what kind of training you have, no matter what kind of experience you have, there is nothing that can prepare you for seeing 20 dead bodies on dance floor. We have officers that had multiple deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, have seen it all, and they came back and said, I've never seen anything like this. And that morning, when I looked into their eyes, I could tell they had seen something that they had never ever seen before. So right away, we do the critical incident stress management, probably like all do. It's not the best system, but it's what we had. So immediately we did large debriefings like this at one of the local schools, but we also had like 20 different breakout sessions where there were smaller groups. The SWAT team, who was very involved, did their own debriefings, long, very involved debriefings. And then, of course, we had mandatory counseling for a majority of the officers who were more deeply involved. We did something at the 6-month mark. We also did something at the 1-year mark, because those issues keep coming up. When we had when the Las Vegas shooting happened a couple weeks ago, the first thing I thought of when I woke up was, oh, this is horrible, this is terrible. But I thought to myself, our officers they're gonna have memories. This stuff's gonna start coming back. So I immediately put out something about all the resources that we have. We're lucky where we have the University of Central Florida near our jurisdiction, second largest university, and they have a program called UCF Restores. It's been in place for a number of years now to assist all the veterans coming back from the Middle East with PTSD. So they offered their services. Many of our officers went out there, and the important part about it is, it's all anonymous. They didn't have to tell us, but we did. Some who did admit that they sought the help were very, very complimentary of it, and they, like I said, they've been doing it for years. They use virtual reality, and they have a very, very good system and program in place. As a matter of fact, they just got like $1 million grant specific just to pulse first responders, so that was a big help. And so you'll see that, God forbid, if you ever have something like this in your own community, that every different counseling service will be willing to assist. There won't be any shortage of programs. But the other thing I did is I reached out to Chief Dan Oates, the former chief of Aurora, Chief Kehoe from Newtown, Connecticut, and invited them down to the Orlando Police Department so I could get a perspective on what they dealt with in the aftermath of their mass shootings. And the one thing that struck me and really dropped me to the floor is they're like, John, you're not going to be dealing with this for the next year. You're going to be dealing with this for the next 5 or 10 years. And that really kind of floored me. And if you think about it, everyone, I have a brother-in-law who's a Navy SEAL team commander for 30 years, and he called me right afterwards. He goes, everyone has post-traumatic stress. He goes, the key is not to let it turn into a post-traumatic stress disorder. And everyone handles that thing differently, those things differently. So that's the tough part about it. Are we perfect at it? Do we do a good job at it? Absolutely not. Always looking for different ways to do it better. But it's something that we're always thinking about. Just because the incident is over and it's more than a year later, we're not going to stop thinking about it. And every time I have large groups of officers, I talk to them about that, about PTSD, and about that, as the chief, I can't know if Billy or John, if they're going through something. You're the ones who work with your fellow officers every single day. You're going to see if they're not right. And if they're not going to go get the help, you as their friend, as their brother officer, need to make them get the help. So this was huge for us. Another big piece of advice, set up a family assistance center. The key here is set it up in an area that you can control so the media doesn't have the access. So we made a mistake. The first area we set it up to, the media basically camped out there trying to talk to survivors, trying to talk to family members of people who had been deceased. Set it up at a large, secure area. We used Camping World Stadium
And after Las Vegas, we actually sent 2 of our people out there as well to assist. And it's basically, one-stop shopping, as you see, for the families, everything they could possibly need. And the great part about that is that the police department doesn't have to or shouldn't do that. That should be the rest of the city departments handling that. And that's what happened in our case. And that took a huge burden off of our police department. So another thing that happened, every single dignitary you can imagine want to come and visit, can't stop it, it's going to happen. You're going to be overwhelmed with resources, and that's when you need to reach out to those other agencies. I know our sheriff called all of his sheriff buddies, and they had every sheriff's agency in Florida helping us out with these presidential escorts, because we had the president, the vice president, Director Comey, the attorney general, and a slew of other political people that came to visit us, and that they want to go talk to officers, they want to go talk to medical staff, and it's a big burden. It's one of those things, you can't stop it, but you have to get help from other agencies. We always take time to remember the 49 victims of this tragedy. And then, as you saw in Las Vegas, just like, everyone wants to donate. We did a good job of calling in the experts, people who have who ran the funds for the Boston Marathon bombing. That's what I would suggest, so you don't try and do it by yourself as a city or as an agency, because people are going to donate, but you want that to be handled the right way. I think they raised over $33 million for the victims and their families. So I've talked a lot about these, but some more takeaways, and I'll hit on some of them. So when we have an officer-involved shooting in the city of Orlando, I immediately go out and I talk with the officers and tell them, what's going to happen with the investigation and how they'll have to go to counseling, and eventually they'll be brought back to work and they'll requalify. And I kind of give them my perspective from my own experiences with officer-involved shooting. And then I also tell them this. I say, go home and tell your family and friends so they don't hear it on the media. And we're not going to release your name today, but we are going to release it tomorrow. And many of you do the same thing. We wait about a day or so. We release the name. It's Officer Jones. He's been out 6 years, never had any issue, and the story really just kind of dies. And we like to be open and transparent. We don't like to keep the names from the media, because then they're always like, well, why aren't they telling us their names? There must be something wrong. So that's how we've always done it. So in this case, it kind of followed that same path. Looking back, there's no way I would have ever done that quickly. I would have waited till all the national media left. So just CNN had 122 people on the ground. So in the days after this, when they're all looking for news stories. And so they want to go talk to these hero officers. They want to talk to the officers, and like these officers would ever talk to them. So we had national media knocking on officers' doors. They have their ways of finding stuff, just like we do. We had national media calling parents and grandparents all throughout the nation, stalking our officers on social media. So looking back on it, I probably would have, if I could have, without too much pressure, waited to release the names of the officers who were involved in the shooting until at least after the national media left. Our local media is great. They get it. They've been trained well by us, and we have a good relationship with them. So the second thing was the fire department not in the command post. We talked about that. So that kind of led to some communication issues. When they heard the explosive breach, they thought the guy had blown up the place. So that was a lack of communication. I take responsibility for that. Like I said, I trained with them. The fire chief had sat next to me in that command post during regional and local training, and should have been there. At least someone from the fire department should have been there, and it would have been a lot better. We're going to continue our joint training with the fire department. You see that picture of us training? That's like 8 years ago. So, and it's just a philosophy
change, a paradigm shift is going to have to happen. So I think the younger generation of firefighters they know it, they know this, they get it. They're not going to be the first ones in. They might not be the second team in, but you're going in with us eventually. And so I think we just got to continue the training. I know some areas probably do a better job than we did. But unfortunately that night we had some older dinosaur firefighters that, hey, that's the hot zone. You know, you saw that fire station across the street. They basically rolled down their doors, locked the doors, even as victims were banging on their door for assistance. We had to order them basically to open their doors. So we're not perfect. We are getting better. I think they get it now. They've all been. They're all getting, Kevlar vests. They know that their job has changed. The other thing shortly afterwards, I talked to my SWAT team commander. I was like, should we have done an explosive breach should we have in 2 different locations? And he said, yeah, possibly. And so it's something we just throw out there. I mean, our point was let's go to that. Let's attack that south bathroom. Let's save as many people as possible before this guy blows up the place. And who knows if we would have done that? Who knows how it would have turned out? That's a video, but I want to leave, it's a short video, a CNN video, but I want to leave some time for questions that anyone may have. No questions? Yes, sir.
Upon initial entry, you had 2 contact teams and 1 contact team that was advanced for transition to a rescue team.
Yes. Yeah, so the question was the contact teams, did they transition to a rescue teams? That's correct. So, Scott and his team were dealing with that back bathroom area. That other team was going, and that's when they found those 22 people. That's when they started searching the other area. Yes. Yes. For the officers? So the question was, were any kind of hearing issues that the officers were exposed to? Not that I'm aware of. Yes, sir. The debrief for the critical incident. So we did that ourselves. Our own critical incident team did that ourselves. But I will say the FBI provided many victim advocates for survivors. So while I have you all here, I do want to introduce Lieutenant Scott Smith and just have him stand up and be recognized. He's our IACP Target Officer of the Year. Scott, will you stand up for me? Thank you for that. And like I said at the awards ceremony last night, he showed incredible bravery and courage. Went into that club knowing that the vest he had on would be penetrated by a rifle round, and then he knew that the officers that were with him, he knew they were going to be in harm's way, but he did what all great leaders do and led from the front. So with that, thank you very much. I'll stay afterwards if anyone has any questions. Thank you.